It's 6 a.m. and you're out there with your coffee, checking your tomato plants before the heat kicks in. You're watering deep, you fed them last month, you're sticking the vines just like you're supposed to, everything textbook. And yet, the leaves are curling. Some flowers are dropping before they ever set fruit. You check for pests? Nothing. You check the fertilizer bag? You did it right. So what's actually going wrong here? Here's the thing about June. It's the month that decides whether you get a July harvest or a plant that just sits there sulking through August. The mistakes that kill tomato plants in June aren't dramatic. They're quiet habits that feel responsible until the plant tells you otherwise. Welcome to Everyday Harvest. Today we're going through the 5 mistakes that wreck tomato plants every single June, and one of them, number 3, is the one I see kill entire plants outright, not just slow them down. Stick around because by the end, you'll know exactly what your tomatoes are trying to tell you. Mistake 1. Watering on a schedule instead of watching the soil. You water every other day because that's what the calendar says. Makes sense. Consistency is good, right? Except tomatoes don't care about your calendar. They care about soil moisture. And in June, that changes fast. Here's the mechanism. As temperatures climb, the soil dries from the top down, but the roots pull moisture from deeper layers. When you water on a rigid schedule, you're often watering a plant that's already stressed from the day before or drowning one that's still saturated. The plant's response to inconsistent moisture is to pull calcium away from the fruit and redirect it to the leaves. That's not a fertilizer problem, that's a plumbing problem. And the visible result shows up as blossom end rot, that flat, leathery black patch on the bottom of the fruit. By the time you see it, the damage started a week or 2 earlier. The fix? Stop watering by the clock. Stick a finger 2 inches into the soil before every watering. Dry at that depth means water deeply until it runs from the drainage holes. Wet still means wait. In peak June heat, that might mean watering every single day for container plants or every 3 days for in-ground beds with mulch. The frequency isn't the rule, the soil is the rule. This connects to everything else on this list because a tomato plant under moisture stress becomes more vulnerable to every problem we're about to cover. Mistake 2. Feeding with a high nitrogen fertilizer. You want strong, healthy-looking plants, so you reach for a fertilizer that promises lush growth. Feels like the right call. It's the wrong one for June. Nitrogen tells a plant to build leaves and stems, vegetative growth. But once a tomato plant starts flowering, its priorities need to shift toward fruit production, which draws on phosphorus and potassium instead. Dump extra nitrogen into that system, and the plant does exactly what the fertilizer tells it to. It builds more foliage, big, dark green, gorgeous leaves, and then it aborts flowers because it's now spending its energy on growth instead of reproduction. You'll get a jungle, you won't get tomatoes. The fix is to switch to a fertilizer with a lower first number and higher second and third numbers, something like a 5-10-10 ratio once flowering starts. Feed every 2 to 3 weeks, not weekly. If your plant is already leafy and flower shy, back off nitrogen completely for a few weeks and let it recalibrate. A plant that's overfed is just as stressed as one that's underfed. Nutrition, like water, is about balance, not abundance. Let's get into the one that actually kills plants outright, not just slows them down. Mistake 3. Pruning too aggressively during a heat wave. You've heard that pruning suckers and lower leaves improves airflow and prevents disease. True, most of the time, but June heat changes the math completely. Here's what's happening underneath. Leaves aren't just decoration, they're the plant's cooling system and its sugar factory. When you strip off a large percentage of foliage right as temperatures spike into the 90s, you remove the shade that was protecting the stem and lower fruit from sun scald. You also cut the plant's capacity to photosynthesize at exactly the moment it needs maximum energy to survive heat stress. The result isn't a slightly weaker plant, it's often a dead one, wilted past recovery within 48 hours, especially if it's in a container with limited root reserve to fall back on. I've watched an entire pepper plant go from healthy to collapsed this way, and tomatoes are no more forgiving. The fix is during active heat waves, prune minimally and only in the early morning or evening, never midday. Remove no more than 10 to 15% of foliage at once. If you need heavier pruning, wait for a cooler stretch or spread it across multiple small sessions a week apart instead of one big cut. This is the one where the plant has zero margin for error. Every other mistake on this list weakens the plant gradually, but this one can end it in a single afternoon. Can I ask you something? Have you ever pruned a plant on what felt like a totally normal day, only to watch it crash by evening? I have. Years ago, I hacked back a tomato plant at noon on a 95-degree day because it looked messy, and by the next morning, it looked like it had been through a drought. Lesson learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Mistake 4. Ignoring the difference between wilting from heat and wilting from thirst. Midday, your tomato leaves droop. Panic sets in. You grab the hose. But here's what most people don't realize. That droop might be completely normal. Tomato leaves curl and droop in intense heat as a protective mechanism, reducing the surface area exposed to direct sun and slowing water loss through the leaves. It's the plant managing its own stress, not signaling an emergency. If you respond by dumping extra water on top of already moist soil, you create waterlogged roots which suffocate from lack of oxygen and become far more susceptible to root rot, a much slower, harder problem to reverse than a few hours of midday droop. The fix? Check the plant in early morning before the sun hits it hard. If it's perky then and only droops midday, that's normal heat response. Leave it alone. If it's still wilted at 8 a.m., that's a real thirst signal, and that's when you water. This ties back to mistake 1. The plant is always communicating through its leaves and soil. You just have to know which signal you're reading.